tired of feeling disconnected from others? Do you struggle to understand and connect with people on a deeper level? Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Social Skills Coaching, where you become more likable, more charismatic, and more productive. Today is Friday, August 22nd, 2025. Today's episode comes from the book Train Your Empathy: How to Cultivate the Single Most Important Relationship Skill. Written, of course, by Patrick King. Don't forget, listeners, if you want more information about Patrick King, you can visit his website at bit.ly/PK Consulting. If you're even an infrequent listener of the podcast, you are aware certainly that empathy is one of the greatest skills in building relationships and understanding ourselves and others. So we know empathy is important, but we don't always talk about how to develop that within ourselves. Today's episode directly addresses that with one simple task: reading fiction. We're going to look at some studies that show that by reading literary fiction, we can learn to see others' viewpoints and learn to empathize correctly with them. And Patrick King also gives us a few actionable daily tips that we can use for selecting the best material to develop that empathy skill within us. Thanks for joining us today. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies, at least according to George R.R. Martin, American novelist and creator of the fantasy universe that inspired the international TV hit Game of Thrones. People read fiction for many reasons, but one of literature's most unappreciated benefits is that it may actually make you a more empathic human being. Reading, or more specifically reading fiction, can be the perfect tool to help you practice stepping outside of your own perspective and into the perspective of someone else, even if that someone else is just make-believe. In the pages of a book, we can go deep inside the hearts and minds of people who inhabit experiences that may be completely alien to our own and see them through our own eyes. We see what makes the villain tick, and we get to try on the frame of mind that inspires the hero to undertake his feats of bravery. We encounter firsthand the motivations and justifications of people who live in a universe far apart from our own, one that runs on completely different rules. The great thing is that reading doesn't feel like hard work. Getting inside the heads of the characters is simply something we do to enjoy the story and understand the narrative as it unfolds. The magic is that somehow engaging empathically with these narratives makes us better at navigating the perspectives of real people in real life once we put the book down. A 2009 paper by Aram and Avaram in the journal Reading Psychology suggests that the benefits of reading may be more properly understood as the benefits of the stories themselves, since young children tend to show more empathy simply by knowing lots of well-known fairy tales or having parents who read to them, even if they can't read themselves. Thus, the empathy power of reading can be gleaned even before someone knows how to read. The key is in the ability to switch perspectives. A 2014 Journal of Applied Social Psychology article by Capozza et al. Similarly found that teenagers and young adults who read are more empathic and tolerant of differences in others. The decrease in prejudice and bias was credited in particular to stories like the Harry Potter series, where young readers are encouraged to feel for characters who were treated unfairly or as outcasts, while similarly thinking about their own privileges, blind spots, and unique difficulties. The authors of the study concluded that reading could make people more tolerant and accepting of immigrants, gay and lesbian people, and refugees, explaining that the world of Harry Potter is characterized by strict social hierarchies and resulting prejudices, with obvious parallels in our society. Although the story contains stigma and prejudice of a completely different kind, people with magical powers versus those without, the overall effect is to broaden perspectives and promote understanding. The very same scientists conducted another piece of research where participants were asked to read the book Saffron Dreams. In this fictional story, a Middle Eastern Muslim woman tells of experiencing racism while living in New York. Participants who read the book were tested to have less negative bias against people of different ethnicities or religions when compared to participants who were asked to either read a mere summary of the book or read a non-fiction work. It's easy to see why reading leads to empathy, and empathy leads to understanding and tolerance. It's far, far easier to accept and understand another if you've stepped inside their point of view. In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the sufferings of millions. And yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. When we read these words written by Anne Frank in Diary of a Young Girl, something special happens. We're no longer reading dry facts about the persecution of those of Jewish heritage during the horrors of the Holocaust. We're no longer standing outside the story, looking in as ourselves, but entering into it and experiencing its contours as the characters themselves feel it. The word I is a spell that transports us into the heart and mind of another. The irony is that our empathy only strengthens when we realize how deeply human a stranger's experience is and how similar to our own, i.e., even if we're not Jewish or 14 years old or hiding in terror from persecution, we nevertheless have felt something of Anne Frank's hope and faith. As our mind runs over the words, I still believe that people are really good at heart, it is as though our brain temporarily believes that it is, in fact, we who have these feelings. This will explain why research psychologists repeatedly find a link between reading fiction and better scores on empathy tests, as well as improved overall social intelligence. Understanding the inner worlds of fictional characters and relating to real people with empathy and perspective is, in other words, the same activity. There is even evidence to suggest that reading fiction makes physiological changes to the brain. In one study, participants were asked to read a historical fiction title, Pompeii, about the plight of a man determined to save his wife during the volcanic eruption that decimated the renowned city. Over the period of reading the book, the participants underwent brain scans. The findings were fascinating. The researchers found increased activity in brain regions associated with sensation and movement, strongly suggesting that just reading about the Pompeii man's plight activated the brain in the same way as if they themselves were having that experience. It would seem that, at least for a few days after reading the story, the participants' brains thought they were inhabiting the body of the main character. Powerful stuff. So, how can we use this information to deliberately flex our empathy muscles and become better at perspective taking? Tip 1. Choose your fiction wisely. You want to go for literary fiction, the kind of writing that immerses you in another character's perspective, thoughts, feelings, and worldview. All the better if it's written in first person. I did such and so, and then I felt XYZ. The classic Bildungsroman is a novel based around character development and focuses heavily on unique people's psyches and perceptions. If you're a male professional working in a metropolitan area in central Tokyo, what does it feel like to step into the shoes of a Russian noblewoman living centuries ago, facing the prospect of a doomed marriage during a time of war? If you're a 55-year-old African American mother of three, what does the world look like from the point of view of a 16-year-old boy living in rural Scotland 1 year after his mother's traumatic death? Naturally, nonfiction will not have the same empathy-building effect, since things like thrillers or crime dramas tend to brush over the inner workings of the characters' lives and focus instead on plot and action. That said, any writing that focuses on the inner workings of another person's heart and mind has the potential to stoke the fires of empathy. Tip 2. Sample widely. Reading is a superpower. Someone else's story is a vehicle out of your own narrow perception and into something new and outside your own web of understanding and perception. To make full use of this superpower, read a wide variety of different perspectives. You can do this on two levels. Choose authors who are different from yourself. This means different age, ethnicity, nationality, religion, political affiliation, social class, generation, profession, or culture. Choose books about characters who are very unlike yourself. Good authors possess the gift of showing you someone else's world from the inside out, and that includes those from other species, time periods, or universes. You might decide to read on a topic that is personally familiar to you, but derive enormous benefit from seeing it tackled from a wholly different perspective. For example, you may have ancestors that lived through the Holocaust, and you may have read widely about the topic, but what happens when you read an autobiography of some of the German officials who were involved at the time? Perhaps you gain a much richer sense of empathy when you read a first-hand account about life during the time of the Rwandan genocide, an event that is wholly new to you and yet somehow familiar. Tip 3. Read actively. There is no question that well-written literary fiction can transport you far from the limits of your own perspective, but it can't do the work for you. Read actively and engage with the story. Consider a particular character and ask yourself, how does the current event look from their point of view? What do they value? And what are they trying to achieve? What's their backstory? And how does it influence their actions right now? Ultimately, what is motivating them? What are they not saying? Consider the things you can infer about them by their choices, their actions, and what they deliberately choose to conceal or reveal. Think about their relationship to other characters in the book. If this person were in front of you right now, what kind of a conversation might you have with them? In one way or another, every story is about the human experience. When you have empathy, you're learning to ask, what does the human experience feel like for this specific human? Why? For example, you may be reading a book about a gay couple in Arizona who are navigating the challenges of adopting a child. If you're not gay yourself, don't want children, and can't imagine going through the adoption process, you could look at their story and think, this isn't interesting, because to you the themes are just not relevant. But the story does become relevant when you look at events not from your own point of view, but from theirs. We could ask, how would I feel in their shoes? But this is not perspective taking. Empathy, rather, is about asking, how do they feel in their shoes? Big difference. Importantly, you don't have to like or concur with the perspective to take it. Remember that understanding doesn't imply agreement, just understanding. The wonderful thing about perspective taking is that you can switch right back again. Even if you don't find someone else's world all that interesting, realize that you still gain value simply by exposing yourself to something new. The empathy you cultivate trying to understand the gay couple's point of view may indirectly help foster completely unrelated relationships elsewhere in your life. Tip 4, be discerning. Bearing in mind that literary fiction can literally change your brain, be cautious about which perspectives you delve into. The mere fact of changing point of view is a valuable exercise in itself, but not all perspectives are created equally. In an era of fake news, mass media manipulation, and underhanded political spin in the guise of journalism, it's worth combining literary empathy with intelligent critical thinking. After all, if you repeatedly read content from a particular person's perspective, there's a good chance it will influence your own over time, or even replace it. Literary fiction is art that is primarily created to explore a theme or aspect of the human condition. But there's a difference between a genuine perspective, an artistic creation, and an artificially constructed point of view designed to influence readers. As an example, imagine you were reading the book Saffron Dreams. But black reminds me of all that is sad and wrong in my life. Ironically, in this country, it validates my state of being a widow. It's also the color of my hijab, the dividing line between my life with Faizan and the one without him. How different lives are from continent to continent. And discovered that it had not been written by author Shaila Abdullah, but by a 20-something American male college student who majored in marketing. Changes things, doesn't it? Exploring perspectives is a wonderful thing to do. Just be fully aware of whose perspective is being shared and to what end. Dr. Sarah Conroth, empathy expert and researcher, claims, I do think that reading books can help to promote more kindness overall, but like any type of media, it probably depends on the content. After all, Mein Kampf by Hitler was a book that promoted hate. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Who knew a guilty pleasure could actually help your relationships? Here are the primary takeaways from today's episode. Reading literature may actually make you a more empathic human being. It can reduce bias and prejudice and literally change your brain physiology. The key is in the ability to switch perspectives. Choose literary fiction, preferably written in first person. Try authors who are different from yourself or books about characters that are unlike yourself. Read actively and engage with the story. Pause to ask questions to investigate the character's point of view, switching perspectives, and exploring motivations and desires. Ask yourself, what does the human experience feel like for this specific human and why? Instead of asking how you would feel in their shoes, ask how they feel in their shoes. However, be discerning about what kind of perspectives you delve into. Today we leave you with a quote from the author of Saffron Dreams, Shaila Abdullah. Empathy is not just a feeling. It's a skill that can be developed and strengthened with practice. By training our empathy, we can become more compassionate and understanding people and create a more inclusive and harmonious world.